Hi there, Randy Green here. Let us continue this little podcast series where I am talking about kind of the news. But the news are not hardcore news and then that group did this or that group did that or that group of aliens are coming in or whatever. That's part of it. That's part of the pattern. No, the news are actually the shift in energy. And it's the shift in the consciousness energy and it's the shift of the reality energies. And that's what's news for me, because that's where we operate, and you will learn to operate as part of your awakening journey, which is not about being woke about all of the horrible things in the world, because the rest of us that have been a little bit of interested in political things from our youth, as me, and have been dealing with the hardcore of life, the kind of, yeah, we know that's happening. Just look around the world. Do you think that everybody's like you in your little hood, in your little neighborhood? Of course not. We have got so many different peoples out there. So the whole waking up and making it a movement and rally against it, yes, definitely good. Raise your voice. But you will also discover, as you have seen, how many rallies and how many protesting and how many being out on the street have there been the last 5 years, and how much has it actually changed? It has changed in some regimes, and then just another dictator has come in and it's not changed anything. It just changed the head of state. It has not changed the government. It's not changed the bureaucracy. It's not changed the way that things are operating, right? Not at all. It has not changed people. So going up against the head of state does not change people. You see, people put their head in state because that head in state reflects who they are. That's part of democracy. We put the ones in power that reflects who and what we are and what we believe. So it's not the head of state that needs to change, it's the people. So that's why we need to work with the people. We need to work bottom up and not top down, because the leaders are the creme de la creme of the mass. So it's always the masses. And we know that, and the Bela material, the Tibetan work with the masses, everybody who wants to instigate change, they work NGO. They work from the non-governmental organizations. They work from the root. They work their way up. And that's what I was part of when I was young and in the peace movement and trying to change the world. That was part of NGOs as well. And was a lot of rallies and there was a lot of meetups and expos and what have you. And did that change anything? No, not really. So what does change? And that's the next step of where the different groups, especially with the event program of aliens, have been more clever. They have figured out what we are, how we work, and how we put together. And then we have influencers and we have social media, we have internet, and now things are beginning to change quickly, but we're also seeing that it's perhaps not changing the way we would like. Yes, we have now, compared to the 70s and 80s, where we had the first really strong voices of climate change. Didn't change much, did it? And we are now having, in spite of all the levels of awareness and we call it demonstrations or rallies and protests in Denmark and around the place, then did not change the policymakers of COP27. Seriously. That's kind of, now we have that environment where you could say, well, now everything's out in the open. We are all on the same page. We all more or less understand that this is what needs to be done. Did it happen? No. And that's what we need to understand, that no matter this is the problem with NGOs and the problem with the ones that have been trying to change the world. They always begin with, we need to raise awareness around it. We need to gather funds. We need to do these kind of meetups where we get funds and we get donations. That's part of it. Financing is part of it. Yes, you need to pay the bills. You need to have that in order. And that's part of the courses I've made, because when I began this years ago, I would rather just do it for free, all of it. But I understood I also had to pay my bills and I had to make a choice. I had to make a choice that if I wanted to go up and tap into the otherworldly energies, I had to choose to be more part of the other worlds than the present world. So I had to create some kind of income that would pay my bills. That's all I do. I'm living enormously minimalistic. I'm only paying for food. I'm rarely buying anything else unless something gets damaged or I need new clothes. I don't have a car. I don't travel. I live as minimalistic as is even human possible. I might as well live out in the woods if that were the case. I'm like this old type of wise woman that is living completely on my own and talking to the spirits of the wood where I'm trying to help other people that comes my way from time to other, which this body actually used to, that's the way this body used to function. So this is the natural configuration for this body to be some kind of, you could call it a witch, if you like, living in the woods on her own. So it's so natural for me to be on my own. I have whatever past life I go into to this that's connected to this body. She is predominantly a she, and she is always on her own. Always, always, always not being around other people. So that's the body I'm into. So that's why it's so natural for me, kind of this, whenever she and I in this life as well have this whole kind of, there are no happy marriages. There are no, oh, males are so nice and cute and whatever, because all she has experienced in all of her past lives are being hunted down, raped to death, killed, raped, killed, raped, killed. So of course, yeah, I'm okay being on my own. Not that I suffer from that, because I work my way through it, but I definitely had a recall of these experiences in this life as well. And the males that typically, because of that energy coding there is in this body, because that's part of that re-engineering that's done to keep it in a specific configuration where a specific type of genetic production can happen, then this body cannot be in a relationship. It cannot be as part of what we call connected strongly to a specific type of male configuration, because of my work with the dark ones and with the third cycle creatures and what have you. Then it will naturally, whatever male that has this Y configuration, then this body will naturally activate the lower levels of the Y chromosome. So it simply just come to the understanding that either I would attract third cycle infused males, or the ones that are not, then eventually that will become that stronger, because that's what I'm clearing out. That's what I'm closing down. I'm closing down the third cycle. So that kind of shuts that one down. And there are then the X configuration that is most very highly connected to the female that it has spawned out of, and that's my mother. And she's this avian, insectoid, whatever. So that has that attraction. And that's part of the fetal pattern, as I talk about. We need to understand what our body's made of, so we understand why we are typically being aligned with certain experiences due to the laws of energetic and genetic affinity. And that becomes enormously strong once your original energy system kicks in. You see, as part of being an original walk-in, and I'm saying an original walk-in because some people are claiming to be walk-in today, and they are not a walk-in, they are a merge. That's something else. But let us just, again, this kind of where I say, oh, I know better, right? But I'm just seeing things differently than other people do. And I know that as I've experienced as well, whatever we're in contact with will always tell their version of the truth, to put it mildly. So therefore, if something we've been told by others, then of course we should investigate it, whether or not it actually is the story, or if it's something that has been tailored for us. And the same story about me coming in to that body should also, when this body was 4-year old and sitting at the bottom of the pool, we have others talk about that same story, which is interesting. We have this weird similarity in different types of stories. And I would say, why would it happen at the bottom of a pool in Germany, actually not here in Denmark, but in Germany, as part of my German family, was because we didn't have that kind of money. That was my father's family that actually had a bit of money. Not that it mattered much in our family setting, but that branches of his family had money. And we were there visiting them. And then I had these puffed up wings on my arms. I was 4 years old, and nothing around my waist or anything. So of course I fell out of these things in my arms, and I ended up at the bottom of the pool. And my sister recalled it saying, you were sitting there so long that it almost seems unnatural. And you see, that's where that's what sparked to life a series of memories. And that could just be, I know it's been a lot of grace going on. And when my mom, 3 years ago, she had a heart attack and she technically died and she was revived. And I had the grace coming in and she was placed with something else, which was not a walk-in, even though her soul took off. And I helped her soul cross over. I helped my mother's soul cross over. What's in my mother now is something else. She completely shifted. She's a completely different person now. So that's, you could say, that's also technically a walk-in where the soul leaves and something else comes in. And that happened to this body as well, because that who was in this body, she died and pulled off, but that does not leave the imprint. So I would say what we classify as a newer type of walk-in and an older type of walk-in. Let's call it that instead of saying what's the real or original or true or whatever. The older version of walk-in and the newer type of walk-ins. Because now the Grays have figured out how to do energy system transfer. They have shown me how they do that. They actually tried it on me when I was in Australia with another girl who was one of the military projects. They swapped our templates and soul structures. That was fucking weird. Anyway, so they can do that as quick as it took them 2 seconds. If there are genetic alignment and we are kind of in the same configuration modality, they can swap the templates of people. And that's the merge. And that's some of the things that are going to happen with quite a lot of huge portions on our planet from here on. So that's also part of the change and the news. And I talked about that for years, but it's being put in motion now. So it's happening now. So that's the next rollout of their plans. So what I wanted to go with that one and kind of completely lost track. We're going into walk-ins and different types of walk-ins and what are the news and what are not the news. The news are all about energetic settings. It's all about where are we in that new configuration of coming in and going, and what are we to do about that, and how are we to operate as change makers. And I think where I kind of lost track of going down the lane of memory of lane of memory. Sorry about that. Where I kind of got stuck in what this female body is, and why I always kind of say the best way to do this is if you're on your own, because this body has always been on its own. It's not the same as the right thing for you to do. That's just how I am conditioned. That's how the genetic memories are in this physical form. And that's why I was chosen as an enslavement body for me. So for different reasons and purposes, it's easier to keep people under control if they're on their own, so to speak. Whereas if there are family dynamics, then the family can ensure that you're always brought back on track, keep you grounded, so to speak. And some of you need that. But then you also have the other, when we're talking about some of the strategies and what's going on, I also seen that in the work that then it becomes, again, you lose your power and give it to others. You become too invested in the system you're a part of instead of focusing on the 1-7 pillar of creating your essence. And that's why those of us who are working that path of enlightenment, we choose the essence, we choose the solitude, so we know who and what we are. And we're typically also the ones that are dealing with all of the other worlds in different ways and forms that are not similar to the ones that are working in groups. So we have different challenges. We have different functionalities. And I know I years ago said, this is the only way to go around it. But then I learned more. I have adapted to, this is how it is. This is what it's capable of. These are the typical type of genetic compositions that are here. This is what they have been engineered to. One of the control mechanisms is that people need that social network. We saw that the last 3 years, people are falling apart because they're not part of a social network. They don't have that ability I have to live alone in the woods for ages and just talk to the plants and the animals. That's fine for me. That suffices for me. I'm good with that. Not that animals don't hold nasty stuff. I'm telling you, be mindful of meeting of that stray cat on the street or the stray dog. They can have things in them that are absolutely nasty. And that's why they're stray dogs and stray cats, because whatever is in them doesn't want to be in a family setting. Okay. So this is the balance that we need to figure out. Who are we? What are we? Where do we work best? And I completely understand the social structure and the need for other people. But the problem comes in with if these other peoples are part of other factions that actually want to draw us into the third cycle, or when you begin to activate, as I talked about, where because I'm dealing with a lot of third cycle stuff, I have that in my field and I got it completely under control and transform it. But that's part of me as a releaser. That's why I'm here, to build that bridge. That's part of my work. That's not just because I came back to do that. I came back to clean up my own mess, but that's what I've been engineered into. That's why they kept me this way. That's why they kept me in this body in isolation, so I could work as a releaser, as a kind of, you could call it trump card. I got in, I was stupid enough to get in, and I got captured, and they're using me for that, because there are different ways of using the original solar system genetics. And because I came from the Andromedan system, I had already created the ability to do the different pathways out, only coming in, actually, not coming out. I was supposed to do something else. Anyways, that's a long story. I'm not going to go down that path because that's not relevant to the case. But that's also part of discovering who and what you are, what your engineering is, because then you will understand the different programs that you have been under. And that's some of the things I'm, again, getting ready to, could I put that into some kind of course material? And that's where we came with this whole, I wanted to do things for free and the NGOs and do everything, because technically I wanted to do that. And I began that way. And then I discovered, because I lost my ability to be part of the base program, I couldn't go to work because I was always in the other realities. And I'm always there now. I can be out there. I can go for walks or whatever, but I prefer just to be on my own, because my point of work is in the other realities, and I have as little connection point with this reality as possible. I am literally like the Jesus character, not Jesus, but like the Jesus characters that goes into the group, gives another information, and then in the Gospels he pulls out and he goes on his own for a long period of time, where he then confers with whatever there in the Gospels is always God, of course, but he confers with the divinities and whatever. He's on his own for a long period of time, and then he goes back in and he teaches the disciples, and then he pulls out and he's on his own for a long time. Because you need to keep that configuration. What you are very much in contact with, you will align with, again, with the base program. So if we are going to do the transition, we need to create projects where we can bridge our original consciousness into this reality in certain projects, where we can then work with the patterns of change and try to expand our energy configuration into a project that has a functional platform inside this reality. That's how things become real, so to speak. Again, understanding everything is energy, but it needs to manifest, to have a ripple effect inside this reality. And that's what I mean with working from beneath. That's part of the Changemaker projects. And now I spent 4 podcasts to get to that point. Wouldn't it have been easier if I just said in the first podcast, under 10 minutes, I'm going to create a project where I'm going to work with food, health, and environment, where I'll try to exemplify all of the techniques I used to utilize in the Pillar Project as an attempt to exemplify change of patterns, or patterns of change, within the understanding of food, within the understanding of health, and within the understanding of environment, following the shift of the energies of the sun and our return to the original timeline as part of a density 1 system. But the question is, would you have understood what I'm talking about? And I also wanted to put in there, because I think that's the first part of change, is to understand what you're up against. You really need to understand what you're up against, so you don't give your power away and expect others to do it for you. Because if you are in that, what you call it, delusional state where you think that others will shift and change the world into a better place, then you better start waking up. That's waking up. Being woke to all the horrible stuff, blah, we know that. But waking up to what can you do for your world, to use JFK's words again. What can you do? What can you do to change the world? And that's where we need to go. And not that I'm all JFK fan or whatever. I saw that BBC TV series about JFK and his family and all these kind of things. But there is a little bit of replay there, because this is the second time in history where we have a Roman Catholic as a head of state in America, right? Just putting that in context. But his family, clearly JFK, whenever one of the men in that family proclaimed that they were going to run for presidency, they died. That was a little bit probably not. But if you look back into what JFK actually tried to instigate of changes, no wonder you can't really say who assassinated him, because he was up against organized crime. He was up against all of the groups within the American society at the time that wanted to keep it a dual world, so to speak, with white as the supreme race and all people of all other colors as sub-races. So he was up against that. He actually got himself some pretty heavy enemies trying to literally, actually it was more his brother Robert that actually worked with that one. His brother Robert actually worked against organized crime. He also took the fight with the people of color issue against the white supremacy, which is still struggling with in America. It has still not been dealt with, because there's still groups within America that has that idea that because you have a different color in your skin, then you are something else. And you say, well, Randy, that does you're kind of talking about different species and this and that, whatever. Yes, we need to acknowledge we're different, but that does not mean that someone is better or worse. You can say, well, it sounds like you're saying you're better than the insectoid avians. And I'm saying, yeah, it might sound like that. Why has it become that when we talk about alien species? Because, and we're here talking extraterrestrials and not because you come from Mexico or someone. No, we're talking about extraterrestrial races. Because the avian insectoids inside our system has been used as a tool in the invasion, as a colonizing species. So they are here working with the invaders to a large degree, or they've been enslaved themselves. But because they're so naive, they don't know what to do about it. They rather remain enslaved than actually go up against their overlord, because they are under overlords. They're slaves. They are not free. So that's why I talk the way I talk about them. And they are being used to attack me from time to time because of the avian insectoid genetics that I have from my mother's side. So you kind of see it all comes down to that. So it's not about the color of your skin. So we can say just because one is that, then everybody else is that. We can't do that. We have to look at the individual. And I can have people with an enormous amount of dark genetics and are connected to all sorts of dark entities and all sorts of shit. But if these dark entities and that dark one, the overlord of that human or whatever, wants to leave, then they come my way because they want to be released. And that's what I do. I release them. And then whatever's left in that human has nothing to do with that. And yet that's when I talk about activating the Y chromosome and the darkness in the Y chromosome is to be released. It's not because I want to turn that person into that. But if that person doesn't know how to work with it, the same with these species, if they're not interested in change, if they're not, and that's why we are seeing inside our reality, we have species here, extraterrestrial races here that doesn't want to change. And that's part of being a change maker when we are creating these projects. And that's part of that project of food, health, and environment that I'm instigating, because I'm choosing that one because it's already completely, the awareness step of it is done. Everybody knows that with a little bit of common sense, right? So I don't need to do the awareness anymore. When I talk about this way of working with extraterrestrials and all the things that are going on and all these kind of things, we have gone through the awareness process. Everybody knows now. So what's the next step? The next step is, how do we implement it? How do we put it into exemplification? How do we actually put it into something that will change the world? And this is again where those of us who are change makers, we need to understand this is something we take on to ourselves. As the first of many, we go first. And we need to understand what that means to go first. And that's part of the Changemaker skill sets, where I talk 4 courses where I share with you what it means to go first, and some of the obstacles and some of the psychological issues and some of the challenges and what you need to be prepared for and all of these kind of things. And I haven't ticked all boxes, because this is just a journey that once you move into that, you are moving away from the reality as it is. And I want to use another analogy from another movie with Brad Pitt, Ad Astra. I talked about that before. But one of the things that I find to be one of the things I really felt resonated with me is that he is on his own. And we can say, well, psychological structures and yada, yada, and childhood trauma and bad father figure and all these kind of things. And you heard I've got the psychological drama going on as well that has coded me in a specific way, because that's how we work as humans. These are the emotional patterns. And some of them we change, some of them we transform, and some of them we know they are there, and some of them we just choose to say, that's just who I am. That's what you are allowed to do in your 50s. And this is who I am. But this does not mean that I don't change. This doesn't mean that I don't have stopped transforming myself. This is not me rigidly sticking to my guns and not doing anything else. No, on the contrary, I'm still changing. But I got the core understanding of what I am, and that's important for me to be that. And I don't want to change that, because that's important for my work to be what I am. But this does not mean that I impose what I am onto you or tell you what to do. That's been a process, and I've now come to the point where I've really reached the potentials of the HAL CHMAR code, where I don't need to amplify to make you do the progression work, because I now understand as my work as a releaser. There are thousands of reasons why that is important and difficult as well for many of you. And I accept that's the challenge you have. And again, that's why I'm just doing fewer and fewer sessions and do more free material and more classes and whatever. And I do hope, and I'll put it in here. I know when people are saying, please donate, I never do. But if you do feel inclined to support more of the free material, going a little bit back to the beginning of how I wanted to do this, so I can create this project, because this project is going to be financed in two ways. Crowdfunding, and that is by donations if you are up for it, because we know that that's part of the NGO. That's we kind of need money to pay the bills, right? Or you can buy my courses and get some learning at the same time. It doesn't matter. There need to be some inflow so I can pay my bills. This is not for profit. I don't need profit. What am I to do with that? I just need to get food on the table, pay my rent, and get clothes on my body. That's all I need. Nothing else. Or you can sign up for, as part of the Food, Health and Environment Project, I'm going to make podcasts that are going to run the entire year of 2023, because that's the project timeline I put on that one. That's in 2023, I'm going to unfold that project. So you can help funding that you can either do 1 month where you go in and listen to the podcast, or you do 2 months, or you can subscribe for 5 months, and then you get access to the material the entire year, and you will continue to have access to that material. You decide yourself. And my hope is, of course, that there will be more that will do the 5 months sign up. That's almost half of the year. And then that should suffice for that project, so I can fuel it and make it run. And if you then at the same time also buy courses and do the progression work and learn by that as well, then we are in that state of where I want to push the whole project. Because the Changemaker projects for me are both educational, but they're also about learning to master energy and consciousness. And they're also aimed at empowering you, and at the same time also to give you the tools of, these are actually the news. These are the energy settings, because the news is no longer, as we saw it with the colonics, as this species come in and that species go out, because that's going to continue for the rest of our lives. This is a swing door reality, because we're in a hub. So that's not going to change. The only thing that we can say is that it's going to get worse and worse. But of course, we're not going to focus on that, give that energy, because then we will invite them in. So we are going to do a little bit of love and light there, what we know we are up against, but we're keeping ourselves in that progressive, transformative, transmutive state where we're trying to create something that will change this world back to the positive, progressive version of the original reality. And that's the Changemaker projects, where we know what we are up against, we know what the threats are, because we know that now. And we know that the world is not going to change in a manner that will preserve the colonizing old world order programs. We're shifting into something else, and it's not ascension. Unless you're an Orion and you come back into physical form, then it will be an ascension for you, because then you'll, yoo-hoo, no longer cricket, yoo-hoo, no longer insectoid, whoa, do, I'm back in a human form, okay, let me go out and fornicate and do whatever I need to do, because that's what they typically do. Okay, sorry about that. got a little bit diverted there. So we are in the original solar system, civilizations, or those of you who come from other systems. We know that expanding and awakening and developing our consciousness potentials are always centered around projects of exemplification that will lead to transition and transformation of reality energies. We are not doing this to change others because they are who they are. We have respect for their choices and what they have chosen to become, whatever that is. We might not like it, but that's their choice, not ours, and we'll mind our own damn business. But what we can do is that we can change reality. We can change the reality energies in the original networks to go in alignment with the D14 collective so that it will lift up energetically. And then you say, oh, I just need to go out and do grid work and go in groups. And we focus on the grids as we've seen people join hands and sing Shambhala and do meditation of light. And then we'll activate the grid to lift it into its higher potentials. And that's kind of where I say, yeah, if you were in your original form as you used to be as part of the other systems, you're absolutely right. But then you would actually create a portal to the system you come from. And if that system has been taken over by some of the scavengers, when you do that, you will open a portal to the scavengers in your own system, because that's what you do when you join hands and sing Shambhala and moves in circles as the Celtics did, and all these women dancing around in Stonehenge and what have you, opening portals. And if you are made of some kind of genetics with races that do not belong here, or you're thinking you're opening a gate back home, and then back home everything's gone south, then you open a portal to that. And I will here do the Avengers of that scenario of New York where the portal opens and weird microbial things came in and completely demolished New York. So no, not the solution, because you're not in control of your body. You don't know what you have in your energy system, and you're not aware of who and what you are. So no, not the Celtic ways. Okay. And by the way, the Celts were administering this portal opening and closing during the last times of Atlantis. They were taken over by hostile species. So they do have genetics in them that might be able to do that. But the portals they open are not to the benevolent wells anymore. Sorry about that, guys. Your druid genetics open up gate systems to what we call the D10 or the D11 that has now completely been taken over by species that have played a huge role in enslaving humanity. Just putting that in context. So that's not what we're going to do. So here we're going to be children of our time. And that's why I do the business kind of thing, because we need to kind of, and I don't like the English idiom going in with two birds with one stone, but that's what we're going to do. We are going to solve the issue of income in the base program. And at the same time, we are also working with the reality energies within projects as it originally were in the outer domain, because here we had workstations, here we had laboratories, here on this planet, in this outskirt, was originally engineered for what you would call experimental labs, where we would work with things that if it didn't work, well, then we just open up a portal to the abyss and it would be sucked in there and cease to exist. So that's where we are. So we need to keep that in mind and say, okay, we are here. This is also the turnaround point where everything that is no longer of use can be transformed and discarded. It's enormously easy here. But we are also, because of all the things that are coming in from the previous universal cycles and the third cycle due to the timeline event, we are now also, all similar black hole gates are being opened as well. So we are having that weird one little light gate into the original worlds. We have got the blue-white light to the abyss that are literally decomposing everything. And then we have got the dark gates into the dark worlds. And we've got the parallel universal gates that are looking a little bit orangey in their configuration because they frequency wise, they're working on that spectrum. So this is these are the gates that we are having around us. And interestingly enough, while I'm talking this way through in this little series of podcasts, even though it is the news, I can hear, because I already begin to think about, I've now made or completed, I need one podcast of the challenges from the sun and the transfiguration of the sun, which will end up in January 1st, 2023. And then the gates will begin to start warming up and open up as they used to be. And I can see what I'm talking about here is, of course, part of that too. So that's part of the merge, why there is happening this enormous amount of merge into humans, because if they can get onto human form and they can get humans to do things, that's also part of some of the spiritual techniques and all this. If they can get people to do certain things, then it's seeded into this reality. And we need to know that. So when we do our changemaker projects, we understand all of these dynamics of reality. Someone is working with crystals and all these things. And all of that is woven into both the progression sciences as well as the changemaker course material. I put all of that in, and the last one is the toolkit, where I really go in and exemplify via another project that I kind of got envisioned, saw it as a vision in my head. I still have it. On water turbines along the coastline that will desalinate water. We have that already. But the thing that is about that is that at the same time, it is also creating power. So it has two things. Right now, we only have water turbines that are either desalinating water or they are producing electricity. That can be combined, and then the electricity can clear the water desalinated on the spot. And then at the same time also generate surplus. I'm going to go into that one because that's part of the toolkit where I use that as a case study of how we can actually work with some of the visions that we get in our head. And I want to refer to another one that got the same way, Nikola Tesla. The original Tesla, not the one that's been hybridized by Elon Musk, but the original Nikola Tesla that came from Moldavia or Slovenia or wherever he came from, doesn't matter, Eastern Europe somewhere, not out of disrespect, but it doesn't matter much. He came from Eastern Europe and he came to Americas, and he had in his mind, he was out walking with one of his friends, and then he just got a download. He got a vision. He got a download where he saw that type of mechanics that would lead to electricity without creating sparks, without creating some of the issues that Edison were working with and the ways that we are using electricity today. We're still not using the coils that Tesla invented that would literally produce energy out of the currents of the magnetic field of the planet. But again, I will also say if we had all put that into motion, then our entire planet would have been linked up to these different turbines of that manner, type of construction. And the question is, would that have been good in the long run? Was it put there for the betterment of humanity? Was it actually put there as a piece of technology that would then allow other factions to come in and take control? That's the question we almost must ask ourselves. And I will ask myself the same question with that technology I have in my head. I know how it looks, but I'm not an architect of these technological wonders. I could, of course, create a project where I could get others to do that. I could draw it and tell how it does, and then others would do it. But we must always ask ourselves, when we tamper with energies of our reality, as we've seen with fossil fuels, that is also working with energies of our reality, except that when we talk about oil and things that are pumped up from the lower levels of our planet, then we're talking about dead animals and corpses. And of course, that pollutes our reality. But there's a reason why they want to keep that machinery going, because that is a way to also activate older types of genetics that allow certain very old creatures to continue to exist inside our reality. So oil is linked to some old racial grids and some entities of a really nasty kind from the second cycle. So there you begin to say, okay, that's interesting. Oil is not just about money. It's clearly also energetic, and it's connected to certain levels of our planetary cycles. Now you get it. Because that's why we're working with as change makers. That's the others we can work with because they are pure energy, and some of them do want to be released. But when they're in organic form, then they're no longer of our business, because then they become what we call living beings. But as long as they're energetic, they are residuals or shells, and they are what we call dysfunctional in the greater scheme of things. You have to have a body if you want to claim to be an existing entity on its own right. And that also means that when you see light bodies of species from higher dimensions, that's because they are in a higher dimension. They appear to be a light body. But if you can elevate yourself up to the same 7th dimension, you will see they are grays. They have a mechanical body. They're not light beings. They are what they are on their own dimension. It's just because you're looking from the 4th and up and just, wow, it's so shiny. Yeah, but it's still a gray. Okay, so you again, another distinction to be made. So as change makers, we're trying to combine projects that will assist in changing the energies of our reality. That's the main goal. We're not for profit. We're not all of that or earn shitloads of money. Why? Well, if I were, I would do the Greta Thunberg way, which many are doing, create a fund and then support others that are coming up with brilliant ideas that will secure a future for humanity. If I should get into that position where I would earn a lot of money, then is that what I will do? Then I would fund others. Then I would become that investor angel without expecting anything in return, literally just donate the money and say, here, use it for that project. I would love to do that. Nothing better than if I had shitload of money. Wow, I would direct them in all sorts of directions. And I know half of the projects I would invest in would probably fail and not work as they're supposed to. But they would be part of a process of finding the solutions we need. And that's how we look at the projects we instigate now. We begin the projects so we can work towards the solutions that we must find. But since we're working within areas of new sciences and new ways of working with reality, there's going to be a lot of trial and error. There's going to be a lot of things that will never come into fruition. That will just kind of fizzle out like air out of a balloon, and then that's it. But then we have learned from that project, and then we're going to another one and another one and another one. And since I used to work as a recruiter and I've been along a lot of people, I wouldn't know when people are bullshitting me, kind of, oh yeah, I need money for this and that, whatever. Of course, I would need to be kind of what we could call a sounding board or some kind of amplifier or some kind of going and say, yes, you need to go that direction or that direction. So my involvement would not be a return interest as in kind of, yeah, you need to give money back. No, not at all. Because if you progress, then I'm happy. All I want people to do is progress. That's all. That's salary for me. If people progress, woohoo, I'm happy. So that's all I want. I just want you to progress. I want you to wake up. I want you to become who you are. Then I'm happy. That makes me happy. I don't care about money or whatever. That's kind of base program, but I need to pay my bills and get food on the table, right? So if I were to get to that point where I would earn a lot of money, I would literally channel this money out to people. And then, of course, I would get involved in a project and then give the advice of that new type of business model, which is probably my project for 2024. Not that I can do that with others, because I don't really expect the factions to allow me to become wealthy. But I am, again, if I learn people to do project management this way, then it will become possible at some point, perhaps not that I will fund the projects, but then at least I would have created the architecture of such a project. And that's the food, health, and environment. I now begin to create the architecture, the programs, the patterns of change that are behind these, so that if you embark on this later on, either by doing the courses and you become part of the thought form, or you begin working with something that's very similar, you might tap into my pattern of change or the architecture or the developmental program, as is so-called fancily in the 5-11 pillar. The developmental program I'm now creating. If you can tap into that one, then you will get downloads of the processes I would already have envisioned, tailored in holographic energy and connected to certain nodal points of our reality, which will support and amplify your endeavors of manifesting it. But I need to manifest it first. So that's the project of food, health, and environment. And I'm taking that because the whole, as I said before, the whole awareness process is over. Everybody knows that. You need to be plant fruitarian if you have got a little bit of common sense, and unless you're engineered to be a meat eater. But everybody else with a little bit of viability rate of the original wells, we know not to kill to eat. We don't use other life forms to support ourselves. That should be completely clear, and of course not. Not big political ideologies and bleeding hearts for the animals and all of these emotional overreactions. It is as clear as day, of course, and yes, similarly as yes, of course, we don't need fossil fuels, and all of these things should just be clearly not even up for debate anymore within the people that you're around and within your groups. It's just common sense. That's the zeitgeist. That's where we are now. That's the sign of the times. This is how it is now. Today, as a modern human, as part of this civilization we call the Western world, or people around the world that want to become democratic, progressive humans that are working towards a common goal of ensuring that portions of humanity will continue. It is clear as day that we are plant fruitarian. It is clear as day that we take care of our physicality. We don't do drugs. We don't do alcohol. We don't do mushrooms. We don't do DMT. We don't do any forms of mind altering, opening up gateways and pathways to other levels of reality field, which we have no control of because we're semi-conscious when we do it artificially. We do it in meditation, we do it in energy work, we do it in clearing work, we do it in the correct manner of how to work with consciousness and energy, clearing out our fields so we can reconnect to our heart field, activate our heart field, activate our brain field, and work correctly on the different levels of reality using field expansion, consciousness, imbue your consciousness on these different fields so you can perceive and operate there in the correct manner under the laws of the different dimensions you're working on. Scientific approach. No more heartfelt compassion, spiritual love, light, sitting in kind of, oh yeah, I love everything that comes my way. Oh, it's so sad for you, you little dark creature with that weird alien technology. You're blasting me to pieces, but I'll still love you. I'll still love you. Let's get real, people. Let's deal with what we're up against. So that's the first step of this one. That's also part of what I'm doing. And I can see now when we talk about the whole academy, I had the first group that has run through the courses and there's nothing more to buy. So this is where I'm putting out the next step of the journey, where we are now the next generation, those of you who are younger, because I worked my way through all of what we call the old world order. And since that project 4th cycle is over and we're heading towards the next step, we are heading towards the ones that want to go into the 5th cycle. And that's where the Changemaker project comes in. But you can only go in there if you've completed the 4th cycle. You can't just expect to do Changemaker if you don't know how to work with energy, because then the trap is you'll probably fall into the trap of the Atlantean ways, because that will then be the path of least resistance, because that's the last time we had the 5th cycle here. And you all know where that led. And that's why we're on the same trajectory, because the last time we came to the 5th cycle, it led to the fall of an entire continent. Yeah, actually, the entire planet. And we are on the same path again, because we have still not learned the lessons. The reseeding did not help, because we're still up against others around us that are not interested in us getting to the point where we could actually transform this system and get it back into the progressive worlds where it belongs. Because then they would have no energy source. So this is also part of the understanding. And I'll sum up and close up in the next podcast. Thank you.